Hey team, and welcome back to another video in our Astrological Magical Elections video series. Today we're going to talk about the magical electional talismanic opportunities that we're going to have between our Aquarius Full Moon on the 11th to the Virgo New Moon on August 26th. So some of you probably noticed that I was unable to do a Leo Full Moon version, or I'm sorry, Leo New Moon video, just due to a lot of kind of crazy things happening in my life requiring me to travel in and out of state kind of often. So I wasn't able to kind of sit down and get that video for you guys. And I wish that I could tell you that in that time I've come back with, like a wide array of available elections to talk about. And unfortunately, that is not the case, just due to kind of the wonkiness of the sky right now. As you probably know, Saturn and Jupiter are retrograde, which gives us some issues. Saturn and Mars are square, which is another problem. The Sun will be configured to that as well, which is another issue. But then really kind of the biggest problem, the thing that made the most, the biggest impact, was just that while the moon is waning through this part of the zodiac, she's going through a lot of mansions that are much easier to work with, much more purposefully workable in a waxing moon phase. So it's just sort of like a moon phase incompatibility, to where working with these lunar mansions in a waning phase is more difficult, not worth it, potentially toxic kind of a thing. So a little bit harder to work with, and that's just kind of the big thing. And it happens kind of routinely this time of year. It's just that normally we would have, like planets or even fixed stars or things to fall back on, and that becomes much more difficult with different configurations kind of making planets incapable of being worked with properly. So just kind of a lot of that going on. But because there aren't a whole lot of elections for this time period, and the elections that are available are basically the same between the three locations, we're going to handle this one kind of old school style, focusing on the election and then talking about it in all of its different locational variances. So it's going to be a chart 1, chart 2, chart 3 kind of a thing, rather than divided by location. So appreciate your patience as we work through this kind of drought of elections at this time. So let's go ahead and get started. And our first electional opportunity is actually going to be for a 4th Lunar Mansion talisman. Now, whenever we come to the waning moon phase in this part of the zodiac, whenever the waning moon can be in Taurus, it's always a really fun time for 4th Lunar Mansion talismans, because the 4th Lunar Mansion is traditionally a more like negative, curse-oriented talisman. But we can weaponize that in a more positive expression by using it to focus on pest control. So pests are an everyday part of life, and having a talisman that can help to reduce their impact, make them scatter, just not be a thing that we have to deal with, is very helpful, and can be a very effective kind of magical application for eradication or displacement or whatever, to complement or maybe even supplement more kind of mundane forms, whether that's having the exterminator. I forgot what they were called for a second. I was going to say they're instigators, which is not wrong, but the exterminator come out and do their thing, and having to buy like a bunch of traps and blah 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 and handle that. It'd be really cool if we just had something that we could put somewhere to to make pests not be here. And that's what the 4th Lunar Mansion is for. It also has other applications that are probably more waxing moon oriented, insofar as like the generation of enmity and anger, but that's not really something that I like to use it for, just because I'm pretty sure there's enough enmity and anger in the world that we don't really need to create more. But it would basically be a talisman in a waxing moon phase that you would utilize to like make somebody mad at somebody else for whatever reason, which is not fun. I don't really condone those utilizations of those talismans, but you do you. But pest control is something that we can absolutely work with and do well with. So looking at this chart for the North American continent, it's going to be for August 18th at 6:30 in the morning. This chart's set for 6:38. And this we're going to have the moon here in the 10th house, conjunct the midheaven, conjoin the node, which is never what we typically want, but in this case that's fine, because we're trying to create a difficult environment. She is going to be applying to this square of Saturn, and she's going to be conjoined Mars at the same time, so sort of this double malefic influence coming up. And then at the same time, we want to look to the ruler of the 1st house, because the 1st house indicates the pest. The target of the talismanic effect essentially is the 1st house. So Leo is on the cusp of the 1st house, That points us to the sun at 25 degrees of Leo, and both the ascendant and its ruler are opposite Saturn at this time. And so our goal with these kinds of elections is to create the most uncomfortable kind of environment that we can to encourage the pest to not be here anymore. Like that's our goal. Like you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here in like an angry tone, like an angry voice is what you want. You got to put on your angry voice. So we want things in these kinds of charts that we wouldn't typically want in our more standard elections, which are more about growth and gain and protection and safety, because this is decidedly an unsafe kind of election, because that's kind of the vibe that we're trying to bring down to make the pest that we're trying to combat feel uncomfortable. So, but that's about it for this, for the North American version of this chart. It's a very simple, very standard. We're in a really interesting time right now to where the node is in the fourth lunar mansion, so we're able to kind of capitalize on that in a way that we're not able to kind of the rest of the time. So it's fun to be able to kind of get a triple malefic influence for the moon involved in this and kind of really hammer home the cockroaches be gone kind of energy. The Western European version of this chart is very, very similar, almost exactly similar. The only thing that's different is the moon is on the other side of the node, and this takes place on August 18th at 6:40 in the morning is what this chart is set for. But we have kind of a very similar thing with the moon in the fourth lunar mansion, and she is applying still this square to Saturn. She's moving towards the node here. She's not exactly on it like she is in the North American one, and the conjunction of Mars. We have the ruler of the first house is the sun in Leo. Both the ascendant and the sun are opposite the Saturn. And I think I forgot to mention this in the previous chart, the North American chart. But the sun and the ascendant are also square Mars. So we kind of have this. We're really capitalizing on this kind of a T-square kind of action, not only to afflict the moon, but also to afflict the ascendant and the ruler of the first house. And it's just a really powerful connection to use to put towards, something that we don't want to be around anymore. And, pests are a really great, appropriate thing to use that for. So that's what I recommend using fourth lunar mansion talismans for. And then finally, our Australian version of the chart is a little bit different from the North American and the Western European versions. This chart takes place on August 19th at 45 minutes after midnight 45. And this one is different just because it's kind of tilted to where instead of having those connections with the moon on the midheaven, they're now on the ascendant, which is a really great place for them to be. Like the ascendant is probably better than being on the midheaven, because then by having them in the ascendant, it's a bit more localized towards the target of the talisman itself, towards the pests themselves, than it were on the midheaven. So we still have the moon conjoin the node here, the moon square Saturn, applying to the square of Saturn, now very close, whereas in previous charts it was much further away, like the Western European version, the moon was like at 13 degrees, so very far away. Still moving towards this conjunction of Mars. Mars is now in the ascendant, and we're able to kind of contain or keep up this idea of not only is Saturn square the moon now, but we still have the affliction of Saturn to the ascendant, which is really good. The only not great thing, what makes your trade-off, I guess, from your Australian chart to your Western European, North African, and North American chart, is that the ruler of the first house is different. So you've got, now Taurus is on the ascendant, which brings us to Venus. And Venus isn't really afflicted by Mars or Saturn yet. I guess if you utilize like whole sign aspects, you can say, it's still in a whole sign square in opposition with Mars and Saturn respectively. And I guess that's fine. As an orb user myself, I don't really see Venus as being afflicted in this chart. That's still something that's yet to come. So you're kind of trading off the more localized affliction of the moon and Mars in the ascendant for also having the ruler of the first house debilitated in the same way that we had in the North American, North African, and Western European charts, where it was the sun that was the ruler of the first house, and the sun was absolutely having a really difficult time in that chart. Now the sun is still having that difficult time, but it's not as significant. It's not as significant to this chart because the sun isn't representing what we need it to represent to really kind of bring it home. So those are kind of your differences in your charts here. But you've got like a closer moon Saturn square to kind of play off as well. So they each just kind of have their own little quirks, and that often happens just because of the time difference between the other two charts and Australia, which has a wider gap of time difference. So the moon gets to move to a different place is kind of the point that I was trying to make there. So while all the locations, North America, Western Europe, North Africa, and Australia, will have an opportunity for that fourth Lunar Mansion talisman, this is where the opportunities or the paths kind of start to split, with North America no longer seeing anything really good for the remainder of this time period, whereas Western Europe, North Africa, and Australia have a little bit more to go forward. The next electional opportunity for Western Europe is going to be on August 24th at 3:50 in the morning, and this is going to be an opportunity for a Procyon fixed star talisman. Procyon is a star that resides in Canis Minor. It sits at 26 degrees of Cancer in the tropical zodiac right now, and it is a star that has a few different purposes. It's used to get favors from people and spirits, so it can be really helpful to to get favors from people that you need favors from, whether that's like personal favors from like friends or family, or maybe more like formal favors, I guess we'll call them, in the form of like good or personally beneficial judgments from legal authorities, or from work authorities, good, like bonuses or promotions or things like that. That can be something that Procyon can help you get. Procyon is also said to give power over magic, which can be very helpful for people who are working in various spiritual magical practices to have a deeper connection with spirit, and to be more successful in their petitions and things like that. Procyon can help you if you feel like you're in kind of like a slump, or just kind of like not being heard in the way that you feel like you need to be heard by your spiritual guides. And then Procyon also has like a healing effect in that it helps to preserve health and prevent disease and illness. So it is definitely more useful. Procyon's not what I would call like a healing talisman per se. I think it's really interesting that the word is preserves health. So it can be really great to kind of insulate one from new health threats. But I'm not convinced of Procyon's like inherent healing potential in the way that I would be with like Arcturus or some other star. But all in all, Procyon's a really neat star. Definitely recommended if any of that sounds like something you might need. For Western Europe, the chart here is going to be the moon. It's going to be the moon on the ascendant with the star Procyon rising at 26 degrees of Cancer. The moon is applying to that ascendant very closely, 2 degrees off, and at this time she's applying this sextile to Mercury and Virgo. And Procyon is a star that's of the nature of Mercury and Mars, so we would want either a Mercury influence or a Mars influence, and we were able to grab that really nice Mercury and Virgo connection. Then we're just looking to make sure that the moon and the ascendant are unafflicted, and we don't really have anything to worry about. This Mars is at 2 degrees Gemini. Maybe, I guess the moon is kind of coming to the sextile of it, but I don't really worry about sextiles to malefic planets as being afflicting. That's not how that works. And then the moon is far out of reach of Saturn's opposition or anything like that, and the ascendant is as well. So all in all, it's just a pretty standard, a pretty good Procyon fixed star talisman. Very excited to stumble upon it in our kind of drought wasteland of an electional time frame. It's a really nice star to come across as a surprise election. But the extra surprise for Western Europe comes just a few hours later, when by putting Mercury on the ascendant, we are able to also maintain this sextile with the moon, this immediately applying sextile with the moon, with Mercury and Virgo in the ascendant. And this happens on Wednesday, so this happens on Mercury's day for Western Europe. And Mercury is unafflicted. Mars is not configured to Mercury. Saturn is not configured to Mercury. The moon is not configured negatively to either of those two planets. So here's just like a really interesting surprise opportunity for a Mercury planetary talisman, which I was not expecting to find during Mercury stay in Virgo for any location. So it's really fun to be able to find one for Western Europe and North Africa to take advantage of. So if you're in a location where you can get this chart to work, and you've been thinking about or interested in developing a like talismanic relationship with the planet Mercury, and your Mercury's not completely messed up in your chart, or you've done remediation work for Mercury in the past, I definitely recommend grabbing this one if at all possible. Just because it's very difficult to tell when we'll have another opportunity for a Mercury election. They're notoriously hard to get because Mercury just moves so quickly through its signs of Gemini and Virgo that it's so hard to get everything to line up the way that it needs to. And here we have kind of a surprise example for it. So definitely grab this if at all possible. So Australia is probably not going to have a Procyon election opportunity. I guess you can kind of argue one, maybe. if you wanted to do August 24th at 5:13 in the morning. My only concern for this one is just like how far the moon is from the ascendant. Generally, I try to keep moon to the ascendant by 5 degrees. So when I put 26 degrees of Cancer on the ascendant, because that's so when I put 26 degrees of Cancer on the ascendant, because that's the degree of Procyon, I want the moon to be within 5 degrees of that to kind of maintain that lunar angularity. And like, I guess you can kind of argue that that happens, but it's so fast that I think it would be difficult to really do anything with. So if you're feeling speedy, you can probably pop out a quick Procyon talisman at this time, but I'm not sure it would really. I'm just not sure it's really there. So I would have a hard time like being very excited about it. You could try moving the moon to the midheaven, the degree of Procyon to the midheaven, getting 26 degrees of Cancer on the midheaven. And in that chart, we have a much closer lunar application. As you can see, the moon is at 23 degrees now, so it's only a 3-degree difference. And 3 degrees is definitely within orb, definitely something that we can work with, that absolutely that we can. My only concern here is just the node being on like really close to the ascendant. I usually don't really care about the node close to the ascendant, but I know a lot of people do or feel kind of like anxious about it. So I've kind of gotten to the habit of not really recommending charts that have the moon's nodes angular. Unless it's like appropriate in some way, like the fourth lunar mansion was earlier in this video. So if you don't really feel like the nodes in the ascendant are an issue, then go for it. I think that's fine. But I know that a lot of people have like a sense of anxiety about it, so I tend to not really recommend them and kind of like given into public concern or like concerns of the public, I guess. However, as a consolation prize, Australia will get that Mercury planetary talisman. Which will take place on August 24th at 8:04 in the morning. It's a very similar setup to the way that it was in the... Yeah. It's a very similar setup to the way that it was in the Western European chart, with Mercury and Virgo on the ascendant and the moon immediately applying that sextile. It is Mercury's day. It's a Wednesday. August the 24th is. And Mercury nor the moon are afflicted by Mars and Saturn. Mercury's not retrograde. Mercury's not combust. Yada yada yada. The whole list of things that we normally want to avoid are not present, and the things that we do want to maintain are in this chart. So again, another really fun opportunity, an unexpected Mercury talisman that I was not anticipating us having. So it's really nice to be able to have. Grab it if you can get it. If you don't have anything to do at 8:00 in the morning on a Wednesday, which can be a real bummer for those of us who have typical working hours. Maybe have to get ready during that time to go to work. Maybe go in late that day if you've been looking for a Mercury talisman to work with, just because, like I said, the timing for Mercury talismans are super tight, and it's really difficult to get them to all line up, and to especially get it to line up with the moon in Cancer. Gold, just absolute gold. So definitely recommend it if you are at all in the market for one. And maybe we can close out by kind of talking a little bit about why the North American continent wasn't able to get either the Procyon or the Mercury planetary talisman, to kind of give a better insight into how I formulate elections, even for people who are not in North America crying and needing some consolation that I'm trying to offer. So part of it, this is talking about the Procyon talisman, but we'll talk about both kind of at the same time. But for at least my location in North America, I was not able to get the moon to be applying to the midheaven with Procyon on the midheaven within 5 degrees. As you can see, we've got 26 degrees of Cancer on the midheaven, and the moon's at 19 degrees, so a difference of about 7 degrees. Yes. That I'm not able to really work with. This might not be the case for people who live in the Pacific time zone, Washington, Oregon, California. You guys might be able to get the moon closer to the midheaven within that kind of 5-degree orb to be able to work with it. I was not able to get that here, so that's why it didn't. And to be so far, that also means if I'm not able to get it in the Central Time, Eastern Time wasn't able to get it either, and Mountain Time would probably be super super dicey. So I don't think they'd be able to get it as well. But Pacific probably could. And then as we kind of advance this chart around, it's like, oh, well, the next time I would have a chance is if the moon was still applying to 26 degrees Cancer while she was on the ascendant. And if we just move the moon forward, we can see that the moon's already at 26 degrees here, and she's in the 3rd house. So by the time she gets to the ascendant, she's in like 28 degrees. So she's past Procyon, she's moved on. So we've missed that opportunity. At the same vein, you'll notice that this Mercury moon sextile here is forming. The moon's at 28 degrees Cancer, 2 minutes, and Mercury's at 28 degrees Virgo, 14 minutes. And to have a good Mercury talisman, I need that connection maintained while Mercury is either on the ascendant or the midheaven. And unfortunately, you just lose that. Because like here, like even just an hour later, this sextile is now separated 2832 to 2817. So this Moon Mercury connection is gone. And so by the time Mercury makes it up to the midheaven here, and it's Mercury's day, it's Wednesday, the moon's at 0 degrees Leo. So she's like completely moved on, moving on to the sextile of Mars, and we're just done. So that's why we're not able to have this is not why we're not able to have nice things in North America. But all right, everybody, thank you guys so much for being here and for watching our magical elections video for this 2-week period. I apologize for not being able to be present in the way that I normally am for the past couple of videos, but that should all be behind me now. Things are resolved. A special thanks to all my patrons being with me and supporting me and helping me out through all of that and kind of giving me the space that I needed to deal with it. If you're interested in supporting the channel and supporting or getting more involved in astrological magic, consider checking out the Patreon for all of the fun extra goodies that you get for doing so, including free talismanic goodies and things like that. But everybody take care. So enjoy your surprise Mercury planetary talismanic elections, people not in North America. I'm not bitter, and I'm gonna go and try to call everybody that I know in Australia and Western Europe to see if I can get something from this, and I recommend you do too. But everybody take care, and I will see you all again in the Virgo New Moon. Forgot what we were.